Well, get started. Great to meet you here at the conference, Victoria. I'm Nathan. I'm one of the co-founders of Ganymede. Prior to this, I was the product manager for some of Benchlink's data products and have a background in machine learning and data. Um, Great to see you here at the conference. I'm curious a little bit about your background and what brings you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. My name is Victoria Mander. I'm a scientist in Janssen R&D cell line development group. I'm also the automation team lead, and I'm here to look for some data solutions. We've got a pretty well established automation platform. Now that we're generating all of this data, we need to figure out what we're going to do with it.
That makes a lot of sense, and I feel like that comes up quite a lot as the next step.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what sort of things are you hoping to do with that data? What sorts of solutions are you looking for?
So this is where the FAIR standards come in. Findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Prior to automation, a lot of our data was being stored locally on computers, or in people's private repositories, or in systems that maybe everybody didn't have access to. So we've been working to, one, store our data in safer repositories, so cloud storage, backed up, so that if an equipment goes down, it's not lost forever. And then also, we want to keep our data safe, so managing access to that data. And then in the grand scheme of things, utilizing all of that data to gain insights into our future experiment planning. Um, what can we learn from all of our historical data that's currently just sitting in folders, taking up storage space, and how can we use that to inform our decision making in the future?
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, what are some of the firsthand experiences that you've seen so far in the what you've been doing at the organization so far? It sounds like you've already made progress on starting to get the data into safer formats and into the cloud. I'm curious what stages of that you mentioned are next.
Yeah, it is definitely a process, that's for sure.
Hmm.
So in getting all of our data into a secure storage format, that's been a lot of working with our IT department to make sure that it is in a safe location, that everybody who needs access to it can find it. Um, I think the accessible portion of FAIR data standards is our next part.
Hmm.
Right now, in our immediate group, you can find the data, but any groups outside of our scope of work would have to contact us for that. So getting that into a larger data repository where samples are linked to the overall project, as well as data upstream and downstream, so that we can see the full scope of the R&D strategy.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny that you mentioned that it goes from uh, kind of the F to the A in FAIR. You can almost go left to right, it seems like, on FAIR and say, okay, well, I have to start with F. What even is the data? Where is it?
Yeah.
And then accessible, then can I actually touch it? And then interoperable, can you have it standardized and a little bit more open in terms of its format? And then ultimately, hopefully, have a chance at reusing it.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you mentioned it that way.
Yeah, and I like that you touched on the standardization. I think coming to standards as a group is really critically imperative. It takes a lot of maybe difficult conversations because you have multiple instruments, you have multiple users, multiple data formats across the pipeline. So getting all of those into a common standard that is reportable for everyone to see is a lot harder than you expect it to be.
Yeah.
You would assume that you could just use some barcodes and that's it, but it's not. It's how, what is your definition and how does that fit into the overall data lake?
Yeah. I feel like one of the things we've encountered as well, similarly, science is just so complex. And that's not to say it can't be standardized or pieces of it can't be standardized, but it is an unusual problem of you really have to pump out the knowledge from everyone that's
Mm-hmm.
implicitly there to try and extract the actual content. Because the standards, to make them work, you have to handle all that complexity in some sense. And so it's really going one by one through people in so many ways.
Yeah, and striking that balance between standard and flexibility, because the whole point of science is we don't know what's going to happen, so we have to test it. And oftentimes we get back results that we don't expect. How do we catalog those? How do we visualize that? How do we learn from it? And incorporating that across multiple platforms, multiple instruments is critically important, but also very time consuming.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm curious, if you had a magic wand, is there any particular challenge you could knock down or data that you try to get online?
So I work in the cell line development group. So we start from a single cell, and our ultimate goal is to have a manufacturing cell line, and that takes a couple months. So our experiments are rather long, and in during that portion, we generate a lot of data. So linking all of that data and being able to look at a manufacturing cell line and see its entire lineage, as well as the research behind the molecule selection,
Mm.
and then being able to visualize that. So much time is spent on data analysis and data visualization, making graphs in Excel and PowerPoint. And if there was a magic wand I could wave to generate all of those tables and figures, it would save me hundreds of hours in a year.
Goodness, yeah. The context is everything, and that's so key to being able to generate those sorts of figures. Um, well, I'm curious then, what are you looking forward to next year with the conference?
Um, so far, I'm enjoying my experience. Some of the things that I would like to see touched on is talent development.
Yeah.
So, data automation in itself is difficult, but it requires a lot of man hours, woman hours in my case. Um, so, how do we develop these skills and these talents? It's a rapidly evolving field, and the needs are constantly changing based on the customer. So, how do we train our people so we're not reinventing the wheel every single time that we try to automate something?
Yeah.
And then another topic, this is just me personally, I'd like to see some representation for women in tech. Um, Most of the colleagues that I work with in automation, robotics, data science are men. And having some female representation it's nice to see that it can be done, and that you're not alienated.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking out at the world of biotech and IT generally, I think it's a very homogenous
Yeah.
group of people, and I'm optimistic that there's paths for that to change, but it's a slow process for sure.
Yeah. Diversity brings diverse perspectives,
Yeah,
and the more diverse perspectives, the better outcome you're going to have ultimately.
yeah, absolutely.